Hello, and welcome to episode 3 of In Service to Transformation with me, your host, Claire Darnell. This week, I'm meeting a beautiful being, Charlie Korda. Charlie is a therapeutic movement facilitator. And I first met Charlie on retreat, and she had a profound effect on my experience of the retreat, and also enabled me to meet a layer of myself that had been unaccessed, let's say, for a little while. So when I was running through my mind's Rolodex of people that had contributed to my own transformation and my own processes of meeting more of myself, Charlie came to mind. And so I'm really grateful, Charlie, to have you here and to introduce you to all of these beautiful listeners, so that they can learn a little more about you, your journey, and what it is that you do. So welcome, Charlie.
Hi, thank you. It's a very sweet introduction.
That was true. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure I told you that, but yeah, we can touch a little bit more on that as well, like give you some more strokes. And tell you how marvelous you are. But yeah, it's so good to have you here. Thank you. I'm really curious to sort of learn, as much as I've met you before and we've had some conversations, there's much about your story that I don't know. So I'm quite keen to delve into some of that, as much as you're comfortable to share, of course.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and I'm kind of, I guess the question is, and where I usually start is, yeah, what was there an aha moment, or was there a point in your life at which you thought, oh, something needs to change here. Like, I need to heal, I need to grow. Was there one of those moments, or was it a creeper? Like, what's your experience?
I think that there were quite a few of those moments. Um, I have a history with addiction, so there were quite a few of those moments. But yeah, I was thinking in terms of dance, something occurred to me when I was thinking about this, which so there was a break, right? So historically, I was a heroin and crack addict. And then that sort of geographicals. Any addicts listening will know about that. You do geographicals. You're like, oh, it's because of this that my life's a complete mess. So if I move town and start again. So during one of those periods, I moved to Brighton and I got involved with the free party scene. And so I thought I was well, because I wasn't using heroin and crack. I was using like party drugs and alcohol and weed, right? So that wasn't true. But like, I thought I was in a much better place. And I was part of this free party scene. I had the van that like moved all the sound systems around. And what I remember from it is just, that free party scene and warehouse parties and all that. It was quite a moment in time where all different kinds of people came together, and the drug scene changed, right? There was a kind of, like, we are in this together kind of thing. And it made like using drugs, like when MDMA came on the scene, everyone did it, right? And people that I had considered like quite straight people were then, so there was this coming together. And I remember just feeling this, just like, mass elation. We're like all on the same page. Everyone's full of love. Forget for a moment the like crazy drop in serotonin 3 days later, right? But like in that moment, you're like, woohoo, and we're together and we're full of love and everyone was so kind to each other, And it was such a spiritual experience for me at the time with what I knew then. But I can remember going, oh, well, I'm wondering if this is possible sober, And it's like, it was so many years before I got sober, but there was just this like, this universal love. Like, surely this is possible without chemicals. Even though I had no intention of not using chemicals at the time, but I remember that thought coming through, and I didn't know anything about what was out there. My life was, for years, I didn't know anyone who wasn't a junkie or an ex-junkie. Like, I literally didn't know anyone, but of course, all these things were going on in another world, right? That, you know, so I don't know, that was just such a point for me of like, oh, the possibility. And I couldn't find that possibility inside, but there was something, it was like a little flame.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, I'm relating so hard here in terms of, you know, that party scene being such a huge part of my beginnings, as all the coming of age in 1989 and trekking around fields and finding raves and sitting in car parks and finding the next spot. And you know, that whole, the elation of it, the joyous kind of exploration of it, the adventure of it, and also the unity of all of the different walks of life that came together.
Absolutely.
And that kind of, what we'd call in recovery, euphoric recall, is really easy to remember and attach to it. But boy, oh boy, the come downs, you know,
Yeah.
the reality of what must go up, what goes up must come down. And those come downs, you know, when you're altering brain chemicals with things like MDMA. I mean, MDMA was a drug that was used for psychoanalytic practices to support people with trauma survival. And so
Yeah.
there's a reason that people that have had traumatic backgrounds are gravitating towards these kind of drugs to transcend and they'll ultimately find that spiritual connection. So I don't know about you, but for me, I found God often on that dance floor, you
Absolutely.
know?
Absolutely found God. And I
Yeah,
think I'd always sort of, dance was always something that was, you know, from the friggin' youth club disco days. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
That it was a place where I found flow state. It was a place where I found God. It was a
yeah,
place where I disappeared
yeah.
and I wasn't full of my neuroses. Do you know? There was just
Mm,
this expansion would
mm,
happen. Do you know?
yeah, totally. And you can, you know, we can go there or not, but I'm curious in terms of we can disappear with what what were some of the dysfunctions that made you want to disappear, for instance?
Well, I mean, what you mean apart from being a terrible drug addict?
I think everybody
I
had,
guess
I
that was
guess,
a part of the disappearing, though, wasn't it? That's what, you know,
yeah,
because we do that to disappear, don't we? That's why
yeah.
we end up in those places. I mean, I came from a pretty dysfunctional
Mm,
um, background,
mm,
lots of, you know, lots of abuse, sexual
mm,
abuse, and,
mm,
you know, a lot of violence in my family.
mm,
And yeah, and I remember kind of, it's interesting, I was thinking about this the other day about how
mm,
when I was a little kid and
yeah,
terrible things would be happening, how I survived, I think, was I would oh, it's so weird, this is gonna sound a bit trippy, but I would like be, say, looking at a wallpaper pattern, right?
yeah,
And terrible things would be going on, and I just sort of on some level was disassociating, right? Looking at
yeah,
something and things would creatures would come out that would be these aids for me.
yes,
You know, like I believed in that ethereal world, and I
yes,
felt like the fairies from my imagination, if you like, were there to hold me through
mm,
that stuff, do you know? And
mm.
yeah, I don't really know where I'm going with
Yeah, that's
that, but
beautiful. Thank
I
you.
just,
Yeah.
you know, that there was something in my innocence that was connected to something more supportive than
Mm,
the reality of what was happening in my childhood, you know?
yeah.
And not all the time, you know, damage was done for sure, but there was a kind of, it's that glimpse again, right? That
Mm,
little tiny ember of like, oh, because that's a where nothing judged and everything
yeah.
supported, do you know?
Yeah. Yeah. That childlike wonder almost, isn't it? That can
Mm-hmm.
still survive even in the face of brutality, abuse, dysfunction.
Mm-hmm.
That actually, I think as adults, when we re-engage with that, it's such a beautiful process, you know. And I think I had, and let's go back to how I met you, right? That you gave me an access point to that through the movement practice in that
Right.
session. That was so necessary. And I remember having this awareness that I was fully present in my body and feeling quite magical, like feeling quite connected, feeling quite, I just remember just feeling free. Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
just remember having this moment of yeah, childlike freedom in my body, and it was a real unraveling. I just started to cry, and yeah, yeah. Sorry,
Yeah,
I that just yeah.
no, I think that's really interesting, because I think so many people are like fearful of doing dance and movement,
Mm.
right? They're like, oh, I can't, oh, I only did that when I was drunk, or I don't, there's a kind of hesitancy, right? Like,
Yeah,
think because people think it's performance, I think, and people think
yeah,
they look
yeah,
a certain way. And what I find fascinating is like I think we're scared of the shadow things that will come up, right? Because
yeah.
like in our bodies, sits the trauma, right? Sits the
Mm.
trauma, sits the pain, but also sits the joy and the
Yeah,
freedom and the childlike wonder that you're talking about. It's like, and
yeah,
so do you know, it's like I'm always trying to encourage people, it's like, yeah, there might be a bit of the dark, but that's also this other completely untapped thing, do you know?
yes,
And it
yeah,
is from childhood. It is playful. It is, I am a magical creature and I belong on this planet and I am
yeah,
part of, that's definitely
yeah,
what I get from my own dance practice. It's like I
yes.
get, oh, I'm part of. I don't need to feel all this neurotic separateness.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, thank you so much. So the whole, obviously you've spoken about dance was a huge part of just your persona and your the way you enjoyed yourself and like being out there on the dance scene. And so when you had this awareness kick in of there has to be more, a way of me accessing this, maybe not high, what happened next? Like what was your rock bottom like, or was there not one? Was it like that gradual unraveling that we often experience, the slow mine? I'll speak about mine. Mine was like this awful kind of, I had loads of rock bottoms, but then the one that brought me into I need to change and get clean was pathetic. It was like a real like wah, wah, wah. It wasn't even that like exciting, glamorous, or dramatic. But yeah, I'm curious, like, what was the deciding moment where you were like, this is it?
Well, I mean, yeah, like I said earlier, like there were many rock bottoms. I have been through treatment, through rehab
Mm,
3 times, do you know?
wow. Yeah.
So I was a tough nut to crack, do you know? But yeah, the final time, I mean, I was terrified. I was terrified every day. Nothing was working. Not, I was taking some heavy opiates. They were not getting rid of any pain anymore. Do you know, it was
Mm,
just, it was just a terrible time. I ended up like, oh my God, calling the Samaritans because I just
yes.
literally didn't know what to do. And they explained to me, thank God, they explained to me the difference between a concept house and a 12-step program. This is like in the
Mm,
90s, because
wow.
those concept houses, which I think are dying out a bit now, I would hope, because
What's a
we're
concept house? Could you
oh,
explain?
concept houses where they sort of like break your ego. That is how you come out of addiction. They shame the crap out of you. Do you know, like, and
Ouch.
when I was using, I'd see people come back literally looking haunted from
Mm,
concept houses. Do you know? I mean, the whole wear a dunce cap in the corner, have a banner of what a useless person you were. I mean, it was just so shaming. So
oof.
luckily, the person on the phone, the lovely Samaritan, who knows, could have been one of us, like
Mm,
they told me the difference, and they were like, you want to be going to 12 steps, you know.
amazing. Wow.
Don't get yourself into anything. And so what happened for me in terms of how I started moving towards movement was that I ended up in this third stage in Bristol, and
Yeah.
I was, doing my cognitive therapy and going to all my groups and all of that. And I was just felt like I was just going round and round in circles with all my stuff, do you know?
Mm,
And I could,
mm,
talk about my childhood and cry and blah, blah, blah. And then it was just from
yeah.
repeat on repeat on repeat.
Mm,
And when those I always know I'm supposed to do something. When a message comes in from, say, 3 different people in your life, there's
yeah.
just this synchronicity, and you're like, so I'd heard
Yes.
about the 5 rhythms from one friend, then another friend mentioned it,
Yeah.
and then so there I am in treatment, and I'm like, could you send me to dance classes? I just asked the treatment center. So there was this 6-week women's 5 rhythms workshop.
Oh, love this.
And Oh, thank God, because I think it saved my life. Dawn
Yeah.
Morgan, shout out to Dawn Morgan, my first ever teacher. Amazing, amazing woman, amazing creature. And she knew I was incarcerated, right? But no one else in the class knew.
Yeah.
And it was such a moment for me because I mean, I love dancing, but like, oh my God, interacting with people, dancing with
Mm.
anything other than a wall,
Mm.
sober, was just like, oh God, no, do you know? So
Yeah.
slowly, I thought, slowly she worked with me, and I even made a friend in the class who, like, literally was the first person I knew who was either, you know, not a using addict or a clean addict. You know, they were like
Yes.
other people, you know.
Mhm.
And I remember at the end of that group, we had to go around and say, you know, just like one little bit we had got from it, you know, like one
Mm.
little kernel. And I said, with my eyes pointing down, you know, my head low, I just said, I am more than my diagnosis. And
Mm.
what that had given me, and then of course she made me lift my head, look everyone in the eye and say it again. And then I,
Oh,
you know, cried and bit quite a lot actually. And but it was such a, oh, you know, yes, do you know, as an addict, do I have slightly more sensitivities and extreme feelings? Like, sure, I do, but
yeah.
I have all these feelings because I'm a human. Do you know?
Mhm.
Like, it just really like wove me into the fabric of I'm just a human and I'm not separate. And um, yeah, it was the sweetest thing. And I pretty quickly moved into, without, you know, I think I did a national diploma in movement therapy, you
Wow.
know, and I like pretty quickly in the first few years of recovery. And then I started working in treatment centers, you know, first for nothing, and then they'd pay me, you know. And I
Amazing.
just was like, I want to give this back. Like, this is so, like, what else would I do? This is the
Mhm.
only thing that makes sense to my body. And I think some of that goes back to childhood, you know, like if you come from a family where people don't tell the truth or are incongruent,
Yes.
it's like this language of movement is a truth. It's a truth for me, do you know?
Mm.
And what I get from moving myself, you know, of my own practice
Mm.
is as I move, I feel like my soul gets to talk to me and I get
Yeah.
to listen to it, and I hear the whisperings of a device from my ancestors, and I get to um, expand into being part of consciousness. And that will, I mean, honestly, as I say that, I'm like going, oh my God, you're so woo-woo. Like, what happened
I
to you?
love it.
I'm It's like that, and that to me is the difference, right? It's like I've met teachers who are like, oh yeah, I work with addiction and it's really important to have a natural high. And I think it's so different. It's like, because I think what's happening with movement for me is we are not going up and out, which is what we did when we were
Yeah.
drug. We are going expansive. I'm on a podcast and I'm doing loads of visuals with my arms. But like, you know, it's outward, like maybe
Yeah.
towards the upper realms, but it's outward, and it's from the ground, right? It's from the ground up, up, up to
Yeah.
the ethers, right? And
Yes.
so it's not just this direction, up and down,
Yeah.
right? And I think it's not a high. It's like, and you know, there's a bit in the you know, in our, you know, in recovery, they talk about being catapulted into the fourth dimension. That is what that is for me. It
Yeah.
is not, do you know what I mean? It's, because that's another piece for me. Like, you know, I'm in a recovery program, but it's like everything goes from intellect to spirit, right?
Yes.
It's like, what about the body? Like, to me, the only way to get to spirit is through the body, like, because it holds everything. Yeah.
Oh, stunning. And yeah, for those who obviously are listening and can't see, the animation in Charlie's expression was stunning. And I have just been rendered silent and my face is hurting from smiling at hearing these stories. And when you were speaking about, you know, that engagement with the class, that initial I got goosebumps because I really relate to movement practice and how expansive it is. And when you said hearing the whispers of the ancestors in the moment, it really is an in and down experience, movement. And I think my entire life was about getting high and elation coming in. And one of my practices as a, you know, as a person in recovery and working with non-linear movement more recently over the last 4 or 5 years is what happens if you don't go up and out? What actually happens if you invite yourself just to stay here in this body, meeting the edges of this vessel and your humanness, and then actually pull that feeling down into the body? And my experience is the amount of capacity that it builds for us to be in our feelings and not keep effectively running away, right? When we're going up and high, we're seeking connection, but we're also well, for me, I'll speak for myself, it was a way of me leaving myself. And for me, it's been about coming home. Yeah. Oh, so juicy. It just makes me want to dance with you right now. So it sounds like you had a really clear alignment come in, and it was dance movement that was really speaking to you. And I am curious, before we move into more about that, to understand, were there other methods of healing that you did find useful alongside movement practices?
I mean, yeah, not till much later, I think. I think you know, I love 12-step recovery. It's a really helpful foundation, and because all my practices are through the body, there was other things that were needed. So yeah, I did. I mean, God, so many things. I got into Continuum, which is a really beautiful movement practice, and much, you know, primal movement and sounding, and you know, that's glorious work. I ended up living in a kind of healing community in Northern California. I've only been back in England a few years, actually. So I was in California about 18 years. And I found this, oh yeah, maybe you didn't know
this about you.
Yeah. So basically I got to about 5 years in recovery, and then I was just, and then I went and I trained as a drama and movement therapist at Central School of Speech and Drama, and went out and worked in India in state-run orphanages. Amazing.
Yeah.
Devastating, right? Yeah. And I then ended up, I'd met some guy, you know, as you do. And I went, and I ended up going to California, which is where he's from. And the first weekend I was there, he took me to, shout out to Harbour Hot Springs. He took me there, and people were like living, I was from South London, right? People were living in teepees in the woods. There was 3 classes of yoga a day. It was built around a hot spring. So there were all these healing modalities that happened in the water, like Watsu, which is like water shiatsu, and then something called water dance, which is where you plug the nose of the person and you move them like a sea creature underwater. I mean, mind-blowing. Do you know, mind-blowing. I'm a very visual person, and messages come to me like that. And that work was just really beautiful. What else have I done? And then loads and loads of dance, right? Like Dawn started off that journey for me, and I work with loads of different dance teachers all over the world, and have done, oh my God, I think in my 30s, I was just like in a dance workshop like most of the time. It was just like, it just made the most sense to me, do you know? It just makes the most sense to me. And I I just felt, I don't know, there's something about just that non-verbal communication that just felt like the place for me. And what else? I mean, I've done loads of, myofascial release body work is unbelievable, I think, for like releasing trauma. Like that stuff.
What is that? What does it do? Yeah. Could you
Well,
explain for people who are listening?
it can physically be quite challenging.
Yes.
Because they're not going into the muscles in the same way. They're like dealing with the fascia of your whole body. I'm getting all visual again.
Yeah. And the
If you're
fascia is
on
a
a podcast,
layer, a network that
yeah,
covers
there's
the
this
entire
network,
body.
totally. And so they're pushing into that. And like, for me, a lot of trauma was, a lot of trauma that, I mean, I guess I knew about it, but I hadn't felt it. It was
Yes.
like this dark echo, and then it
Yes.
would like come up and out. And those practitioners are incredible, really incredible. And
Mm.
and really transforming, like they'd dig in, they'd get into the trauma. And then I used to do this thing, this might sound a bit out there as well, but like where we would change the narrative by, you get to escape this time.
Oh,
So a trauma would come up and you feel it and then you get away. So you
yeah.
are re-empowered, and you do it through, like, I don't know, I mean, so much trippy shit has happened, like,
Yeah.
I mean, panthers coming through me that activate me out of there, and just, I
Yeah.
mean, it's magic, and it's
Yes.
it, I mean, I think it really changes us cellularly, that kind of work. And um yeah, I feel like I've had a veritable healing army putting this situation back together,
But how beautiful that you were so open to receive that healing as well, because that's a big part of the
Mm.
journey. Coming to a place where actually we realize, oh, I'm worthy of receiving this healing.
Yeah. And I'm very grateful to that part of me that other people might call ungrounded, but I call adventurous.
Yeah.
It's like that I was seeking, like I
Yes.
had all my years in India, and I
Mm.
was with like a guru for like 4 years, and traveled around with him, and that,
Mm.
those were some of the most joyful times in my life,
Yeah.
because there was just this realness, and a that tipping point of a group of people who really wanted to shift,
Yeah. Yeah.
and yeah, I'm really grateful for that courage that I had,
Yeah.
and I also think there was something about going 5,000 miles away
Mm.
that allowed some freedom to get to some of the stuff that maybe if I'd been really near my family or other
Mm.
people from my part, there was something about that distance that just sort of like offered a space.
Yeah. Space, a fresh
Yeah.
perspective. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow. Oh, there's just so much in there. So the transition, so you're talking about all of these healing modalities that you're experiencing for yourself and you're benefiting yourself, and then you trained. So were you at this time also facilitating?
Mm-hmm. Well, not the first few years in California, but
Mm.
then I trained, the order of things. Yeah, I had this drama and movement therapy thing. Yeah, I guess quite soon I was like working in treatment centers, and I was
Yeah.
doing, both things. I was doing movement, and I was doing like drama therapy and like
Mm.
storytelling, and we would use myth and story as a therapy, which was really that's very beautiful work too. And
Mm.
yeah, so I worked in treatment centers and some mental health units, and then I trained in 5 rhythms,
Yeah.
and had a class in San Francisco
Mm.
for a while, I think, maybe not that long, because I got really injured, but that's another story. I
Is it a dangerous practice? I mean, I've done it, and you
No,
do
no,
get
well,
yourself
I
into
mean,
some shapes, right?
yeah, I don't think, I mean, I'm sure jumping up and down on concrete floors in the end wasn't that brilliant for my body, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think I just had like a disc injury, and then had to have
Mm.
surgery. And so
Right.
um that took me out of that teaching at that time. But during that time, I ended up working in this graduate school, the California Institute for Integral Studies, which is a really cool school in San Francisco.
Wow.
And they pulled me on to the Expressive Arts Masters, where you're I think mainly, I mean, I was teaching them the drama and movement therapy model that I had trained in years before, but I was also teaching them, like, these would-be therapists, how do you lend your body to the healing of another body? Do you know? Which sometimes is just you being grounded, you being at the same level as the other person, you not, being in any confrontation, it's the kind of trauma-informed stuff. And that was absolutely delightful. I did that for like 10 years, and it was so lovely, do you know? And I noticed that the older I got, the students would be like young enough, old enough to be my kids. Do you know? I was at that sort of age, and it just felt so delightful to be offering that kind of work, knowing, because it comes back to, if you're gonna like be there for other people and do any kind of healing stuff, like, we have to be here, we have to be home in our own bodies, right? And if we're home in our own bodies, we are aligned with our own goodness, and then you can be aligned with another person's goodness. And that's a really beautiful starting point, right?
When you were telling me a little bit about that work the other day, it really got me reflecting on how important it is to like be with yourself. And because everyone talks about doing the work, but actually even in the process of facilitation, there's such a requirement for us to be with ourselves. So I think what you're speaking about here is, how are you showing up? And you said lending our body to the therapeutic process, but it's like, being able to hold the parallels of, where is my client, I hate that word, but where is this individual who I'm interacting with at, and where am I at, and holding the two in parallel, and staying with them and staying with yourself. And I do wonder if there are many people who are actually doing as much of that as is required to keep people truly safe, including myself, on my own learning journey. I can see and experience how, there have been moments of real egoic kind of, I'm holding space, and like that learning curve that we have to go through of, actually it isn't me healing anybody, they're healing themselves, and I'm just illuminating the way. I'm illuminating the way.
And we're just, in that place, we're just a conduit, aren't we? I always try and feel like I'm having a little word with the higher realms before I teach or do anything, because it's just like, please let something come through me. Let me get out of my own way so something can come through me. And I think that's really normal to have like an egoic response, right? It's like, when a class goes really well, you're like, oh my God. And I just did a hair flick, by the way.
I love it.
But like,
it was great.
We want to take credit, and that's something that I've noticed in any of these realms of like waking up, in a way, right? Is that it's our soul that wakes up, and then our ego wants to take credit for it. Bless its little heart.
Oh, it's so cute.
It's
right?
Like, and you've just got to go, did you think that was all you? Equally, when you have a bad class and it doesn't land, and it's not all you either. I think there's that sort of like good therapist, bad therapist, good therapist, bad therapist, depending on the day. And it's just like, no, I'm just an offering. Can I just be an offering?
There's also the third option, which I've experienced some of, which is, you think you had a bad class, you tell yourself it's a bad class, and then everybody tells you how amazing the class was. And you're like, you sneaky little ego, like, as much as the ego wants to take credit, the ego also wants to keep you in a box and keep you safe. And it's like, oh, you really went out there and you did some stuff that we hadn't pre-agreed, and that was a little bit edgy for me. So I'm just going to tell you that was shit, and you mustn't be doing that anymore. You know,
Yeah.
like stay in your limitations.
That's such a good point, isn't it? Because we think of ego as being big, but ego can be in the small position too, right? It's still ego. Like, yeah, totally. And
Yeah,
I notice sometimes, like, say I'm working with a group of people, and from the naked eye, it doesn't look like there's much movement going on,
yeah,
or
yeah,
maybe they're a bit stiff in their body, or do you know,
yeah,
like, I'm making it, but we have no idea what's going on internally for somebody, really. Like,
yes,
well, I mean, we can have a bit of an idea, but sometimes when I'm in that small ego place, I'm like, oh my God, you're so ineffectual. Look what nothing's happening. But actually, I've done that when I've helped people in the water doing this water dance stuff. I trained in that as well, and you know, like, a body can. I thought, oh God, he wasn't really moving, and he went
yeah,
really stiff, and and then afterwards we've had a feedback, and he's like, that's the most movement I felt in my body in years. And I'm like,
wow,
mind blown, because that is not what you know, I mean, if I think I could get the little small ego out the way, I could have tuned into that. But I was there, judging the
yes.
outside and not being aware that there's another experience.
Mm, totally. Currently plotting how I can come to you and we can go to a swimming pool and you can do some water therapy with me, or go to a pond
Okay.
and I can get you to dangle me around in the water so I can experience this incredible medicine. Anyway, back to the point in hand. And that is, I mean, the pieces that you've spoken about, and like I love how you just casually slip in, oh, and I'm trained in this, and oh, and I'm trained in that. And the other day when we spoke, you just dropped in that you're a professor, right, in of this university, this organization in the
Yeah.
US. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, that was what I was talking about it. I was an adjunct professor on this expressive arts course, and yeah, so that's when I was teaching the people like
Amazing.
half my age, and teaching would-be therapists. They were in their first, second, or third year, and they were teaching them how to hold a group, how to work one-on-one, and how to find ways into their own bodies to anchor
Yeah.
themselves so that they can
Mm,
be of the ultimate service, right, to
mm,
someone.
yeah, totally.
And that happened quite by chance.
Mm,
Like, I basically was teaching a 5 rhythms class in San Francisco, and I had some students. It was down the road from this grad school, and I had some students from the expressive arts course, and they felt that they had, like, the art covered and the drama covered, but they didn't feel like they were really getting enough of movement, and so
mm,
they pulled me in. To start with, it was a workshop, for no credit. They just had to do 2 electives a year, but for no
yeah.
credit, and they made it a unit on the
Wow.
course. And what's quite funny is that a few years prior, because I went out to America, right? So I had a master's in drama and movement therapy, which was completely useless in the United States. Do you know? And so that's partly why I always worked within a treatment facility, because then you're sort of working under someone else's license,
Yeah,
because
got you.
I couldn't call myself a therapist there. Um, and what was quite funny is they pulled me in as an adjunct professor at a
Yeah.
grad school that had refused me as a student.
Oh, boom. I love that. And
That's like
circle
a mic drop
completes.
moment, isn't it? I just yeah, it was like, I don't know, but
I love that. What a synchronicity, and what a homecoming to your true value and worth, not being reflected by this bureaucracy that says you
yeah,
can't teach this thing, right? And like it's a real callback to like the true essence of what medicine is, and that is our embodiment, our grasp, our passion, our love of the modality.
yeah,
And in a sense, what comes from that is our command, and our ability to share it is from how truly we believe and embrace the thing.
yeah, absolutely.
Mm. And there's definitely a need to be trained and to be responsible and all of these things, of course, because we learn so much. Yeah. And so I am I'd love to ask, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to go there. In terms of your transformation now, and I mean, this is a hugely transformational journey and you're already touching other lives, but right now, are you in a process of transformation? Would you say, like, where are you at the moment? Yeah, so in terms of your transformation, I'm curious, where are you at now? Because we're constantly learning and seeking. You mentioned that earlier. What's moving through for you at the moment?
Well, I feel I've been quite emotional actually. It's interesting the card you picked right at the beginning because I've been because I feel older and I feel
Yeah.
like my work wants to shift, do you know? And
Mm,
I have a small private practice of like doing one-on-one work, but I feel
yeah.
like that feels um that feels my calling too, do you know? And it hasn't been as big for me as working with groups, but I feel that coming through. And I'm doing, yeah, in terms of like, yeah, I mean, I guess around, around energy levels and around just like, where am I going to be of the most use moving forward? And I don't think I'm not that old and I'm not there yet, but I can feel the waters
Yeah.
of that, of like, oh yeah, this is going to need to shift again, I think. And yeah, and I'm also doing some more training at the moment. I have
Right.
these healthy addictions in my life today are training, and yeah, I've some teachers that were because that's what I've noticed over the years is I need a teacher
Yeah.
always. I need a
Yeah.
teacher always. And I think those times where it's got dry for me around what I'm offering or just how I'm feeling is because I am not filling up, you know? And I
Totally.
can have my own like practice at home, but it's not the same. It's not the same as having a teacher. And I didn't have a teacher for quite a few years. And all through that sort of like those pandemic years, I got very, very isolated. I mean, I did the craziest thing because I moved back to England like that was
Yes.
going to help in the middle of a pandemic. And I
Wow.
literally knew like two people, do you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, don't do that, folks. But hopefully there won't be another pandemic for you to do it in.
Everyone else was trying to get out and you were coming back, right?
Well, there was such an exodus actually out of California because
Right.
house prices went nuts. You
Yeah.
know, I lived around, where Facebook, Google, like all of that
Yeah.
was, so all the
Yeah.
tech people moved across the bridge, house prices went crazy, loads of people dispersed, it was
Got
a
you.
very odd time. Plus Trump, George Floyd, insurrection, it was America felt nuts and I felt
Yeah.
scared there for the first time, actually,
Yeah.
and we
Yeah.
had what crazy wildfires that year, crazy
Mm.
wildfires. Anyway, I digress a little bit, but
That's like a
anyway,
whole
I haven't had a
podcast,
teach.
right? Just that part of your journey is a whole podcast.
I mean, yeah, because I have never got that isolated.
Yeah.
I think even more than addiction, I have never
Mm.
felt that isolated,
Mm.
and it did something to me
Yeah.
physiologically, and it took a while to heal from it.
Yeah.
There was something that felt emptied out by it,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's those little familiarities, like. I thought, oh, I'll come back to my old friends, and and but it was the little like that you don't recognize the person in the food shop, and you don't
Yes.
that way of walking through the streets, and I don't know, there were like all these little familiarities. I was like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
yeah,
Everything's
there was
changed.
yeah, definitely a bit strange, and we've all, obviously we've all got some crazy COVID story, you know, like people
Yeah.
really went through it, didn't they? It was
Yeah,
kind of
we did. Yeah,
like
it was
this.
very isolating time. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so I definitely was like, oh, I need a teacher again, do you know?
Yeah.
And some two old teachers of mine who were five rhythms teachers and have now created their own body of work, the
Mm.
360 Emergence, they're called Kate Scheller and Amber Ryan, and they are just delightful. And their whole organization is so female led. It's
Mm.
just beautiful. It's really beautiful, you know, and yeah, I just love what they've done with the place in terms of conscious dance. And
Wow.
so I'm doing a teacher training with them at the moment, and they offer um how you work one-on-one as well as in
Mm.
groups, which I think is just it's so essential that we have that part.
Yes.
Because if we have
Yeah.
the one-on-one bit, then we are more knowledgeable about the group, I think, about
Yes,
how the group
definitely.
works. Um, yeah, and that kind of, yeah, so they came into my life. I've done a lot of traveling in the last couple of years when
Mm.
once we could again. And yeah, do you know, there's nothing I like better than to like go to the other side of the world. I know you've been there too. I've been spending quite a lot of time in Costa Rica
Mm.
and doing dance workshops. I'm just like, I am so happy in that
Yeah.
environment. It's just like
Yeah.
it's just my medicine. It's just the thing that makes sense of my strange little life. Do you know? It just makes sense of it.
I think your life sounds so far from little and actually not that strange. It sounds delightful and it sounds big and full, and it's really interesting, isn't it? When your perception is my strange little life. And obviously, I know they're just words that you used in that moment, but yeah, and how others, I'm sure, who will be listening will be thinking, wow, what a huge life to come from where you did with, as you say, the dysfunctional family and the experiences that loaned into your journey, and then ultimately a life of addiction, escapism, to then be fully present in the moment of being and learning and doing and just constantly moving forward and acquiring knowledge and experience and learning, and a huge life. And I love your humility, like as you're speaking, I just feel your humility pouring from you around. Yeah, I just love it. It's just beautiful to be in your energy exchange and experience this willingness to keep learning. Yeah, it's really inspiring. Mm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting the lens we look at ourselves through, isn't it? And
Yeah.
how, I'm so, I just haven't done the normal things. And
Yeah.
sometimes when I view myself through the overculture, I'm like, you are a weirdo, do you know? And and then I need to be with people who are lit up by the same things, I guess,
Mm.
right? And then
Yeah.
it's like, oh, okay, you just
Yeah.
created your own education system, that's all, do you know?
Yeah.
But I
Totally.
need that other lens to look through because I don't, because I feel like God on paper, I'm just like, am I a disaster? I think I might be a disaster on paper, in terms of that whole like, I didn't have children,
Yeah.
I didn't get married, I didn't, like
Yeah.
it's I realized something a while ago, which is sort of beautiful and painful all at the same time, which is that freedom is more
Mm.
important to me than love.
Mm.
Do you know? And I just think
Mm.
because of what I'm made from and because of my past experiences and just because of what medicine works. And there's a like, oh no, well, I'm sure both are possible, but I definitely prioritize freedom. And I think it's because I came from lots of different places where there wasn't any,
Yes.
you know?
Yes. Oh, yes, 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 yes. Yeah, and I'm mindful of time, and I really want to be able to provide the listeners with, yeah, an access point to what it is you offer. Like, what are you offering at the moment? We know you're learning, we know but you're so capable of offering. And so I think we spoke before, and you said you were working in a therapeutic setting with service users who are in addiction, who are trying to find recovery, and you're working with them, and then I know you're also holding space for others. So how might people be able to access the opportunity to work with you currently?
Well, I mean, I'm Bristol based, and I work, currently I'm holding a group through the Bristol Drugs Project. So that's for people who have been affected by addiction historically or presently. So I'm doing that for the next year for sure. And then I offer community groups to it started off with women in recovery, right? With my fellows in recovery. And then it's like, I had this reading with this wonderful witch woman down in Cornwall. And she said to me, because everyone needs a witch and a psychic.
Yeah, totally.
I was just saying. And, and I extended it to like, it's recovery. So my work is called Recovery in Motion, but it's like, it is addiction. It's also codependency. It's also grief. It's also trauma. It's PTSD. It's anything that we are holding because of our overculture, because of the patriarchy, because of like the wounding that has happened. And, especially to women on that level, but also to men. And it's like, we are all in recovery from something. Do you know? Like all those normal neurotics out there, do you know, we are all in recovery from something.
Yeah, we are.
So I offer I offer community groups, and because I'm training this year, it's a bit more sporadic, I would say. And then I also, like the way that you met me, I'm kind of like the movement part of when people are teaching. This is definitely something that I do. Like when people are teaching something that is sort of more cognitively based, I'm definitely the movement facilitator that brings in, like, how do we back this information up through the body? How do we make it make more sense through the body? So I'm definitely available for that. And then I work one-on-one, I work one-on-one with people, which is just really sweet, where we're like really using, someone might be talking to me and they keep repeating a movement, and then that's the point of entry, right, into the beautiful realms and landscapes of the inner body and the outer body, and that's really sweet work. And I think that's work that I want to do more of, do you know? Yeah.
And is it possible, because I'm curious, I'm being selfish now, but is it possible to work with you remotely and online, or is this something that would have to be in person? I'm curious.
I've been thinking about that. I mean, I think we could. I just like, I don't know, there's something about being able to like put your hand on someone's back. Do you know? There is something about that limbic resonance that happens physically in a room. I definitely think I could mentor and kind of guide online. So if there are people out there that are like, oh, that sounds kind of interesting, like I'm totally open to trying things out. But for me, there's something about that physical presence of another that just feels
nourishing,
pretty essential. Do you know?
Yeah, I think one of my reflections, though, and this has been from being somebody who's receiving teaching, mentorship, and then also having facilitated spaces, both in person and online, there is definitely an element of freedom that can come into play with an online workshop. So, for instance, if I'm being facilitated and guided, the teacher's online and I'm in my own space, I think that can give a level of safety that might not be available in a new setting. And there are pros and cons, or like positives, negatives, however you want to call it, in that going into a space, meeting an edge, being in the energy of others is in itself a growth opportunity. And sometimes what I've noticed with some clients, for instance, is it enables people really to drop in. I think especially in the line of work that I've been moving within with sacred sexuality, where you can really drop in and be intimate with self and be exposed and have nudity and maybe feel that that's more accessible to you safely via distance,
Yeah,
So I think,
yes. I think I want to amend my earlier comment actually, because so so through the pandemic, through all this kind of crazy like loneliness, I just constantly did dance classes online. And
Yeah,
what
right.
I found was, I am an inherently shy person, which is why it's so odd that I became a teacher in a way. But
Yeah,
there's something about moving in the safety of your home with
yeah,
your beautiful sacred objects around and
beautiful.
all
Yeah,
the things you get to be in relationship with, and you don't have that sort of like rush of someone else's energy. You get to
yes.
really drop in. So yeah, I think when I answered your question before, I was kind of thinking like, yeah, not from a more one-to-one than a group thing.
Mm,
But
mm,
yeah, I definitely have. I felt like my it's interesting. So it's all this external loneliness, and then there was just this
yeah.
like a deeper, a deeper personal connection with my, a deeper connection with
Mm,
myself from
mm,
being, yeah, and teaching too. I mean, I've definitely taught groups online, but I
yeah,
guess there's something with the one-to-one where yeah, I think it just might be new realms for me, actually,
yeah.
because I've taught a lot. Well, I think you've come to
Mm,
some of my stuff
yeah.
online. Like, I think that stuff translates.
Mm,
Uh,
totally.
but it's the tracking of one
It
person,
is. Yeah,
that I'm like,
yeah,
yeah, I'm open to it, and we'll see.
yeah,
We'll see. But
yeah.
I think if someone worked with me now, then maybe we could start online and then work to wherever we live
Mm,
in the country, find a way of meeting up. Sometimes we
yeah,
could do it like that. Um,
mm,
yeah, because
yeah. I love that.
it's very. I know we're in just such a different realm, aren't we?
World, right? I
And
know.
then with so many gifts of it and so many like,
It really is about constantly recalibration, like a
yeah,
constant calibration of where am I at with this and how do I feel about being digitized and like removed from that human connection, and actually how do I make the most of this opportunity to be in connection if this is all that's available to me, and actually how is
yeah,
this convenient to me and how is this not so good for me, and it's that
yeah,
constant reflection. And that's why I love your response of like, actually I want to retract that because there are so many layers to it. This is
yeah,
why I love conversations with people who are really self-aware, because we are just constantly like, oh, actually, the difference in perspectives.
yeah,
Um,
and just all the like shoulds, right? Like
yeah,
I have quite a lot of shoulds still in my head after all
yeah,
the work of like, well, you should look like that, and you should be able to have physical contact. It's like, well, actually,
yeah,
we know so much more about this because we were forced into it, but we actually
mm,
know like, oh yeah, like I do a class online with one of
yeah,
my teachers every week, and it's
yeah,
like it just becomes a bit more personal, the practice of it,
yes,
you know.
yes. Mm.
So it's all good. It's all
I
good.
could literally talk to you for hours, and I know that you have to be somewhere, so it's really frustrating. Um, I I just am so excited for what you are continuing to bring into the world. And I'm insanely annoyed that I don't live closer to you in Bristol, because I really want to be, a recipient of your teachings, because it's just stunning. And I hope that, the listeners have been able to take as much as I have from this conversation. And I think because you have such a beautiful journey of transformation that you've experienced yourself, and a path of healing that you've been through, I would love to ask you for, any reflections that you would like to share with people who are on their own journey of healing. Would you have any suggestions, any reflections, that you feel might be good for people to, not even, I don't want to use that word, that might be useful for people to hear if they're on a
In,
journey of healing?
in terms of movement, or in terms of all
In
of the
terms of your perspective on healing, so your own journey, it's really interesting because every time I ask this question, like we get into this, like, what do you mean? And I need to work out how to articulate it. I think this is part of my transformation, right? On this journey is like, how do I articulate the things that are in my head and make them come out so that the person being spoken to understands? Um,
I mean, I think
yeah, in terms of your own experience and your
mm,
perspective of the world, what would be your reflection for those who are embarking upon a journey of healing? would you have any suggestions for them that might be the thing that helps them access that healing?
I mean, to always be hopeful, do you know? To always have
Yeah.
that hope, to always know that things can change. And sometimes that's a really long process with some of our like deeper issues and different ways, you know, and our not so helpful ways of behaving sometimes, you know. There's just kind of, that's just a slow burn, do you know?
Yeah.
And also I just think there's just such an ebb and a flow. Like there's sometimes in my life where I'm just like cruising and I am so acceptant of who I am and what it, and then other times I'm like, oh my God, this, I need to deep dive into something, do you know?
Yeah.
And I, you know, I said earlier about the, you know, the synchronicities, you know, like if you hear about something from 3 different sources in your life, go do it. You know, I do believe there's a, we are being spoken to, do you know?
Yes.
And if something isn't meeting you, do you know?
Yeah.
You know, there's times in my life where 12-step recovery, great, that's all I need. And then there's other times where I'm like, oh God, no, you need some, you know, you need some more help here, you need some more input here. There's something that needs excavating. And yeah, and I would say about having allies and about listening to I've done a lot of shedding actually in recent years of just like of different friendships, honestly, where I've just like that deep listening of like, do I feel good about myself in the presence of this person? Right. And to move towards that. Not that people don't give you feedback and reflect to you. I don't mean like, oh, people that are just going to blow smoke up your ass, you know. I mean people who are going to be like that they see you. I think it's really important. Yeah, I think it's really important. We need our allies. We need people on the same page as us. And we need those beacons, do you know? Like those like, oh, what do I aspire to? And so I think there's lots of messages and signposts. And so how do we listen to that, I guess, is the secret, isn't it? It's like, and so any kind of like body-based, whether that's yoga or dance or getting massage or, you know, just like in those moments, what is your body asking for? What is your soul calling out for? Because I think everyday life, rah, 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 overculture, patriarchy, the absolute, let's say it, insanity of the world right now. Like, I can't even believe it. I cannot believe
it's
it.
nuts.
It's nuts, right? And it's so frightening. And when you're sensitive and you're someone who's moving towards healing and needs healing, it's just like, well, that is some serious shit out there. And it's like, so what are those spaces? Cultivating those spaces where I'm getting, there's some TLC, there's some safety, there's some places where my body can open up. And that might be your living room and a really sweet playlist, right? It can be simple. Anything, you know, or it can be like, I'm off to Costa Rica, I'm traveling around the world, I'm going to be with all these teachers, like whatever it is you need, do you know? But we need to be held by all of those things, I think. And so there's a like, where do I feel good? Where do I feel safe? You know, like I live right by a park and a river, and I walk there every day because it does something for me. Because something, all that like me, just disappears. Do you know? It's just like, oh, I'm just out in nature. Here I am.
Connecting with nature, just seeing what's moving around us, right?
Yeah.
And just being in the now. I think that's what it does for me. It brings me back to now. And all my thoughts will still be going on, as you said, the nya, 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 nya. And there's the now. And there's the, oh, look at that little bug and what that's doing. It's like, oh, why is it doing that to that leaf? And, you know, there's that presence that it brings. So, yeah, I feel you. I feel you. Yeah. And as somebody who has a breadth of facilitation experience, I'm really curious if you have anything to offer to those who are wanting to maneuver, who are in a space of facilitation or who are wanting to maneuver into being of service to others, in service to the transformation of others. Would you have anything to share with those individuals?
In terms of dance, yeah.
Whatever you want to share, babe.
Well, do what you love.
Yeah.
Do what is your medicine, what reaches you, like everything I was saying before about the healing, like what is your medicine, what reaches you, what puts you in a flow state, in a state where you are consulting with your ancestors and hearing your soul, and then pass that along, pass that along. Like sometimes I've had, I've been doing this 25 years, and I'm like, what are you doing? Why don't you get a proper job? That happens every so often, and then I'm just like, what else would I do? Like I literally don't know what else I would do. So yeah, I think dig into what feels good and offer it in a, and you might offer it in a different way. You might have, I really like working in more marginalized communities where this is not accessed, and it's a pretty white space, let's face it, isn't it? This sort of like waking up thing. It's just like let's be like mother spiders, right? And get this out, get this everywhere. This
Weave
needs
that web.
it needs to be everywhere. So, and that's what I did without any qualifications. I was just like, well, this has helped me. I'm gonna make people in treatment do dancing, And some of them, I'm sure, thought I was completely insane, but some of them loved it. And it's like, I always say that when I work in treatment, it's like, what is your way into your body and so into that flow state? And it might not be movement, it might be yoga, it might be going to the gym, it might be running, it might and rock climbing, whatever. What is the thing that just like lights you up a little bit?
Oh, thank you. It's just so much in there, and it's been such a pleasure to speak to you and to learn a bit more about your life and your journey and how you're in service to transformation of self, in service to transformation of others. And I just have lots of gratitude, and there's going to be loads for me to reflect on, and I just know that you've impacted me, and I'm sure many others, with just you sharing yourself so honestly, so vulnerably, and so openly. So thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you for making it so easy. This is I'm a weird shy person that doesn't like talking much, so I'm just like, okay, so you must have woven some magic for me to be able to do this.
Thank you. I'll take it, and I'm feeling it. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Pleasure.